Hi, Lenneke. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. Now, can you tell us what city gets the honor of hosting you at this very moment?
Well, I'm situated in Monnikendam, which is a small town right outside of Amsterdam. So for all of you listening out there, it's obviously that I'm not a native speaker, so please forgive me if I make mistakes language-wise.
You sound awesome. You're great. um, what inspired your journey to veganism, and how has it shaped your activism today?
Well, I think I was one of many. I turned vegetarian at the age of 11. I was eating a steak with my family during a huge family dinner, and I cut through the meat and I hit like a loin, I think it's called, or tender. And I said to my mom, like, wait, what is this? And then my mom explained it to me, and I was like, so what humans have? And at that very moment, it clicked for me that I was actually eating a cow. So then I didn't want to participate in that anymore. I didn't want to harm animals, and and especially didn't want them to be harmed in my name. And it took me another 20 years, and I'm ashamed to saying this, but I was reading an article in the dairy about the dairy industry. I had not read 3 sentences, and just this realization of, oh my God, a cow who produces milk is a mother, that hit me so hard. So I became vegan at that very moment, because it just hit me like we can take nothing from an animal. Anything you take from them hurts them because they're not here for us. So I was like, okay, I don't know what the problem is with eggs or the problem with honey, but I'm gonna learn all of these things. But now I'm vegan, and this is how I'm gonna live my life. And I think that how it shaped my activism is one of the things that I kept thinking, like, I'm a very intelligent person. And yet I had never even come to question why we are using the milk of a cow, let alone realizing that she's a mother. So I kind of looked into the social conditioning and all of those parts. But as a lawyer who works in IP law, so trademark law, copyright, but also advertising law and unlawful publication, so freedom of speech, so everything surrounding communication, I kind of came to realize that it was the propaganda from the dairy lobby and the meat lobby, of course, that teaches us that animals are here for us to be used and that it can be done in an ethical manner. And when you pretend it can be done in an ethical manner, then it must be something that is all right to do, right? So I was really looking through it through that lens. Yeah, and that's how I started using my skills as a lawyer as my tool for activism.
And how do you see the legal frameworks helping to combat issues like greenwashing in the food industry, where you see a happy pig or a happy cow, but in reality, that's not the truth?
No. Well, I think it's important. One of the reasons I named the organization Stop Humane Washing, which was actually a close friend of mine who said you should call it Stop Humane Washing. He's a close friend and he supports me in everything I do. So shout out to him for if he's watching, Peter. But it is actually, so what you're describing with the happy pigs and the happy cows is actually called humane washing. So when we talk about greenwashing, it really is implying that the animal products aren't as detrimental to the climate as they are, which of course they are. And humane washing is really pretending we can use animals in a happy way, in a great way. So one of the examples I use, and it's on the website. It doesn't come up immediately. There is like a little block that you can click because it's quite explicit. But it was a picture taken by Tobias Leenaert, who wrote a book How to Create a Vegan World, and it's a picture of a lorry, I think, if that's the right word. And one door is closed, and you see like a a pig drawn that is like lying in like a beach chair and just chilling and having a happy life. And then the other door is open and you see the inside of the lorry or the truck. And then you see, that pigs hanging there. And that's what humane washing is. They're portraying like this happy, wonderful, carefree life. And then you actually see what actually happens. So that is what humane washing is. And greenwashing is much more of saying like, oh, this doesn't really impact the environment. Or one of the claims that we see happen a lot now is about regenerative grazing. Like, oh, but cows are so important. The grazing is important for the storing of emissions or whatever it is they say. Which of course is also not correct, but that's a whole other story. So that's the difference between humane washing and greenwashing. But with my organization, I fight both. And there's a third one that people are often not aware of, and that's health washing. I'm sure we are all aware of where do you get your protein. I never hear anyone asking someone else, where do you get your fiber, which is actually something that we miss a lot more than protein, but that's not something I have to explain to you. But then you get, for example, we in the Netherlands had this beer. Like, that's not healthy, right? Drinking beer. No problems with anyone drinking beer, but I don't think anyone says, I'm living a healthy lifestyle, so I drink beer. And then they add protein to it, and then they promote it as like a healthy beer. And that's called health washing.
Wow.
Yeah, there are so many tactics from the industry that once you get to see it, it's actually quite mind-blowing.
And I think that's where the importance of you and people like you who are defending what people are saying, and kind of pulling back the curtains of all
Exactly.
this washing, because they're thinking that the public is stupid, I guess, or dumb. They're not going to question it. Would you go, oh, this is wonderful. This is good for you. Like, they say like chocolate has some health properties. However, you drop it in milk to have chocolate milk or something like that, the health properties of the chocolate diminishes quite in a big way. So
Exactly.
but they're saying, oh, this is healthy for you. Milk is good, like milk. It's good for your bones. Yet they neglect the part that milk actually drains the calcium from your
Yeah,
bones.
and the other thing is we have like a lot of propaganda here in the Netherlands. We're one of the most dense when it comes to factory farming, which is actually quite difficult for us vegans because whenever you're like on the bus going somewhere and you're going, past all the fields and you see all the cows, as a child, I would be thinking like, oh, I'm seeing cows. And now I see what's behind it. So there was this big campaign where like a white farmer, she held like a glass of milk with like cows behind her in the field. And she says, milk for all of us, or milk from the farmer for all of us. And that was wrong on so many levels. So first of all, milk isn't good for it's not from the farmer, it's from a cow, from a mother who produces milk for her child, right? So doesn't come from the farmer, it comes from the
And
cow.
and a mother that has to be impregnated over and over and over so that you can have that milk. It's not like a
Yeah,
natural occurring thing.
not at all. And we take away her baby, we send her to slaughter when she served her economic purpose. But it is wrong on many other levels as well, because she says milk is good for everyone. That's actually not the case, as we know that 70% of the world population cannot tolerate lactose. And it are generally black people and people of color that are affected. So it's actually also quite a white norm. So it's actually upholding the white supremacy. With the cows grazing in the field, well, first of all, that hardly ever happens in the Netherlands. And even if it happens, what people don't realize is the fact that they get heat stress from, we have different, so we work with Celsius. So from 22 degrees Celsius, cows get heat stress. That's probably, I think that's around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but I'm not sure. I should have
Okay.
checked it before. But it's a relatively low temperature, which would be nice for us, but cows get heat stress and they don't have anywhere to hide from the elements while they're grazing. Because in the Netherlands, it's all just fields without any kind of vegetation or trees. So even if they're outside, which happens in about 15% of the cases, they're only outside for a little while. And even when they're outside, they're probably still suffering due to heat stress. So this kind of shows that it seems like such a simple advertising move, but it upholds all the structure. It upholds a system that is rooted in equality, in inequality and oppression of humans and animals alike. So that's where I come in. But at the same time, as hard as I try to fight it, when we look, for example, at advertising law, we always use the average consumer. And that's a little bit tricky. For example, when I am going to attack any kind of humane washing, there was this campaign in the Netherlands what's called Farmers Love Their Cows, Love Their Milk Cows. They gave 6 reasons which proved that they loved them, so they were allowed to chill. Of course, they didn't say like a cow needs to lay down in order to rechew because otherwise she won't produce milk. They said they always have fresh air, which is of course, but they don't actually mean fresh air as in outside, but they meant like a ventilation system within the stables. Well, anyway, things like that. So I filed a complaint with a friend and we said, this is misleading because it paints a really happy picture and you leave out everything that actually happens to the cow. She's bred into existence solely to exist like a milking machine, not the mother that she is. We talked about other infections, about the fact that 30% of the cows, well, 28% of the cows are crippled. The ear tax, the dehorning, that's another part that really upsets me always. A lot of people don't even realize cows have horns anymore. And then when we talk about dehorning, one of the things that happens from the industry, they will tell you we do that to protect the cows. Because if they fight each other, they'll get wounded, they'll get hurt, because the horns are really, really sharp. So we actually dehorn them to protect them. And as lovely as that sounds, they're not going to fight and hurt each other because of their horns. They're going to fight because you put them in unnatural positions where they cannot live out their life like they're supposed to live out their lives. So that's another point of framing from within the industry. But okay, back to the campaign. So we said it's misleading. And then the advertising committee said something like, and also farmers are like our cultural heritage within the Netherlands. So it feels, people often feel offended. Even though I always say like, I want to help them too. Let's transition to plant-based farming. But then the advertising committee said something like, well, the average consumer understands that this is not the whole picture. And it's just more the idea that farmers love their cows and that's allowed. I knew this was going to happen and I still cried because it was very difficult for me. I feel like it's very difficult to have explained to people that it's wrong to have animals being bred into existence to serve humans. But the thing that did happen during that proceeding was that we found out that even though the campaign was brought as a campaign from young farmers, they literally said this is a message from young farmers, it was actually a campaign that was funded and executed by the dairy lobby.
Of
And
course.
within advertising law, we have 2 rules. First, it needs to be recognizable as commercial, as the commercial that it is. So there is a difference between idyllic, I don't know how we would say that, campaigning from young farmers or commercial advertising from the dairy lobby. And the public has a right to know who is behind the advertising campaign. Because of course, whether it's a young farmer or big agro, that's going to make a huge difference, right? So we filed another complaint and we won that one. So it is also, which means that they're not allowed to use the campaign without making clear that it is actually a campaign from the dairy industry, from the dairy lobby. So yeah, it is an uphill battle, I'm not gonna lie, but I also feel like if we just keep pushing, if we just keep trying, there needs to come a point where people are gonna be more aware. I feel like as a lawyer, it's frowned upon in the Netherlands to take a moral stance, which surprises me each and every time because every lawyer has some type of element they use in their work, like whether it's, does my client have enough money, or do I like this type of work? And for me, it's, does it have moral value, what I do? So, but that's frowned upon because we need to be neutral. But I also hope by being very open about it, by speaking about it a lot, to, well, lead as an example. That sounds a little, I don't want to make myself appear bigger than I am, but maybe give some inspiration to people that we can use our qualities as lawyers or whatever setting you're in for the better.
And ethics and morality right now, we need to bring that forth so much more, uh,
Oh,
especially in this given space and time. Uh,
yeah.
Everywhere, but especially in America. But that's another issue. Um,
Yeah, but I do have to say we're following suit here. The Netherlands is becoming more and more like like America, so that's very problematic.
yes, it is. But another thing that I did, I looked through your website. Another thing that I found was very interesting, and now I've learned something, and I love to learn something every day, something new every day. But that usually I say humans and non-human animals. And I saw you had a better perspective. It's better to say animals and human animals
Yes.
rather than to go non-human, because then I see the point where you're again taking them out as different than humans, but actually we're all animals. So really we should specify it the way that is on your website, which is animals and non and human
And,
animals.
and human animals, yeah. And I totally get why we started using the term non-human animals, because I think it was meant to say we have non-human animals and animals, just to make clear that we are in fact all humans, animals, that we are in fact all animals. But then when we talk about non-human animals, we are centering animals around what they are not. So we are defining them by not being humans, therefore centering it around humans, which I think is one of the large issues that we have. So yeah, that's why I have opted to. I thought about it long and hard, and then I was like, well, maybe I should just say animals and human animals, because that still makes very clear that we're all animals, but without centering it around humans. Yeah.
And words are very important. When we call an animal an it, we kind of
Oh yeah.
degrade them a little bit. So they're either a he or she, and all those things, and especially like things that we used to say, like killing two birds with one stone. So instead, changing it to feeding two birds with a stone. Although making those changes are important because when people hear it, they'll hear it in a different way. Otherwise, you're still promoting kind
Exactly.
of cruelty, and you're promoting animals as being lesser than.
Exactly. You're maintaining a hierarchy where humans are more important than animals. And we get to define whether animals have agency or non-agency. That's another word that is often used within the movement when we speak of animals being voiceless. That might also be problematic because, in fact, they do have a voice, but people just are not willing to listen to it. But when we say they are voiceless, there's nothing to be heard. When there's nothing to be listened to, you don't have to act upon what they're telling us. So, and
So a better way for voiceless is,
so I usually say voices that aren't heard. But I have to be honest, it is difficult to really come up with the right language. So, for example, when it comes to what happens to animals, what is being done to animals, there are a lot of people that will say it's a holocaust or it's a genocide. I think that's problematic on more than one levels. First of all, I think when we talk about the Holocaust, I think most people will think about the Jews and what happened to them in World War II, and they deserve that. They deserve for their pain and the suffering that was inflicted upon them for being Jews. That deserves its words on its own. I think when we hear this term genocide, I think most of us will now think about the Palestinians, what happens to them, their history, their oppression. And I think that Palestinians deserve that, to have a word that recognizes their specific type of suffering. And at the same time, I think animals deserve the same, and yet they don't have a word for it. But when we think about it, an animal is being bred into existence solely to serve a human and to have its life taken from by a human. So I'm looking for a word, and I've been looking and searching for over a year now. So it's quite a journey, because it needs to be a word that encompasses all of these animals: human dominion, the servitude, the scale on in which it is taking place. So it's a very difficult word. So if anyone has any ideas, please do share them with me. It's a very
Oh, and me
difficult.
too. I want to hear it. I want to hear it. Um,
Yeah.
so before we end, let's talk about your website, Stop Humane Washing.
Yes, we have a now stophumanewashing.org. It started with a .nl website, but as the animal liberation movement is expanding and growing and growing past borders, I felt like doing it only in Dutch was a little bit too, it was limiting a little bit. Um, and then my website is being hosted by this amazing organization called Cage Undefined. I think it's very important to always give a shout out to others in the movement. They use tech to enhance the movement and to provide to further animal liberation. So I had the website stophumanewashing.nl, and then I was like, is it also possible to have like a more international one? And then Pablo, the owner, the founder, he was like, within 5 minutes, he was like, okay, I've got stophumanewashing.org for you. So that's amazing. So that's absolutely wonderful. The website is both in Dutch and in English. And one of the main reasons I founded Stop Humane Washing, because I want people to know about this, vegans and non-vegans alike. And I think that a lot of people just don't know what Stop Humane Washing is. If you were to ask someone in the Netherlands, a specialized lawyer dealing with advertising law, and you would say, what is humane washing? It's usually something like this. Huh? So I have to explain it to them. And so I want to create awareness around what it is, the way it impacts us. As a lawyer, I know how important language is. We just spoke about some of the examples, therefore. Unfortunately, the law monopolizes language. For example, milk can only be used when selling the milk of a cow. When you sell goat's milk, you have to use the term goat's milk. And when you use sheep milk, you have to use sheep milk. And when you want to sell plant-based milks, you are not allowed to call it milk at all. I know it's the same in the US. And I know that Oatly has had this campaign where they said, like, we cannot legally call this ice cream, but you still can, which is actually brilliant from a legal and marketing
That
perspective.
is great.
Yeah.
Oh, that
So,
other one that says not milk. I like that one too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think that's one of the reasons I became so aware of how important language is, and it's so reflective of who we are as a culture and where we stand. So that's one of the reasons that, as it's so important in my work, I also think it's so important in my activism. For the word animal friendly is another term I hate, because it kind of gives the impression that friendliness and oppression of animals can go hand in hand, which of course is not the case. And then I try to use like examples that are a little bit more obvious to people, like we're not going to say women friendly, right? So circumstances. And within the Netherlands, if anyone ever sees a misleading claim, whether it's humane washing, greenwashing, or health washing, if they want to file a claim but don't know how to do it, or if they're scared about it, then they can just have me as their lawyer. I do it pro bono because I do everything I do for animal liberation. So yeah, that's kind of what Stop Humane Washing is. It's meant as a legal instrument and an instrument for raising awareness, um, having animal liberation people gather around new topics, talk about how language impacts us, how we can use it in a different way. So yeah.
And that's very important, is to bring these matters up for the public and for others, to educate them, because if you don't know, you don't know, right?
Exactly.
And then the way that the meat and the dairy lobby, just like oil and farm and whatever, they have big bucks for advertising, and they have
Oh,
people on their staff that know and every day think about how to phrase things to fool you, because
I
that's the
think,
bottom
yeah,
line.
And I think people aren't aware. There's so much talk about the fossil industry lobby. I think people are hardly aware of the fact that the lobby from the animal industry, so whether meat, dairy, or the egg industry, or the leather industry, they're very known for humane and greenwashing as well. Um, those lobbies are actually way more powerful. And people are just not aware of that. And I also think they don't want to be aware of it because when it's about fossil fuels, it's a little bit easier to see like they are the monsters and I am just a victim of their actions. And I think when it comes to meat, dairy, egg, and leather and all of these animal products, you have to take responsibility for yourself because as long as you don't live vegan, and I know that not everyone is able to, but I'm just putting it out there. But if you are able to and you can live vegan and you're not doing that, each and every time you decide to pay for animal products, you are normalizing and legitimizing the system. And therewith, you help maintaining the status quo. And therewith, you give the power back to the lobby and not to us, not to those fighting for animal liberation, and definitely not to the animals.
Exactly. And you just let them continue on with their cruelty and exploitation. You normalize violence because that's exactly
Exactly.
what it is an industry of violence. And so it's like you have to put the information out there, and hopefully people will start questioning and maybe researching themselves and finding out more information and deciding that maybe this is not how it should be. Just because this is the way we've been taught all along doesn't mean that this is how we have to progress forward.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think my parents are wonderful examples thereof. My mom turned vegetarian at 69 and vegan at 70. And my dad turned vegan, I think 6 months after my mom became vegan, and he was 73. And it was very interesting to see how it worked. So for my mom, it was more the way it worked for me. I made the connection with like, I'm hurting animals, I'm normalizing and legitimizing them, the violence perpetrated against them. I don't want to partake in that. And for my dad, it was a little bit different. So he read the complaint in the first proceedings around the campaign, Farmers Love Their Milk Cows. I hate the word milk cows, by the way. They're cows and they're used for their dairy. So that's normally not a word I would use either. But he read the complaint and we had, like I said, we had talked about everything that happens to the cows there. And I think he was upset because he didn't realize, but I don't think it really clicked for him yet. But then when the response came from the young farmers, he called me and he said, okay, two things. First of all, I hope you never, ever, ever charge anyone money for this kind of rubbish. I said, I don't. And he said, and second of all, if this is your comeback at everything that you have said in your complaint, then they are aware of the fact that what they're doing is wrong, and I will not partake in an industry like that. And I think that kind of solidified for me. Listen, I'm aware of the fact that the lobby won't lay awake at night because I kick their ass in legal proceedings. I really don't think it will hurt them that much. But each and every time I win, I can use it to bring awareness. I can tell people about it. I give lectures about it. I can post about it on the website. And it becomes a tool of raising awareness. And yeah,
And that's absolutely true. And the thing is that everybody has to remember that really, even though, like you said, the oil and the dairy and all of them, they have money, right? They have power. But they only have that because we, the people, have given it to them. So we, the people, can take it away if we
exactly. We are funding them.
act in the manner that we need to, which is say no to them. and
Exactly.
and as powerful as they are, without us they dwindle. So that's what we need, is we need more of us and less of them.
100%.
So before we wrap up, is there any last sentences, emotions, or words that you want to give to our viewers?
Just that I hope that we will all continue to fight in our own way. Um, I know it's really difficult sometimes. I mean, I lay awake at night a lot of the times knowing what happens to the animals and also the humans in the industry, right? I think we don't often talk about the fact that they're often being oppressed within the industry too. Um, Once
And
you
the
realize,
individuals that live where they situate these animal
yes,
culture.
yeah, and also the fact that it are usually people from marginalized communities that suffer the most. So I that's why I think it's also very important for me as a white woman. So what I do whenever I give lectures, I will only cite the voices of black vegans, of people of color, or queer people, because I think it's really important if we say animal liberation is against the, we're fighting the oppression of animals. And I think it's really important to also keep those oppressive systems without our movement. So that's another part of my activism and my advocacy, I think. Um, yeah, and just as hard as it is, we need to stick together. We need to come together. We need to find each other. If anyone wants to talk about these kinds of subjects, feel free to always, you can reach me via the website. Well, not at the moment because I'm having some technical issues, but that will be be arranged shortly, so that will be fixed. Or via my LinkedIn. I'm always open to having discussions and be of support to others, whatever we need.
Well, thank you so very much again for joining us and for your expertise and for doing what you do. You are a
Thank you so much for having. No, I'm not.
you are a hero for the animals and for the planet. If you're working towards promoting veganism and advocating for these things that are outrageous, you are a hero for the animals. So thank
No,
you so
thank you.
much.
But so are you. I hope you are aware of that.
Take care.
Okay, same to you.